So welcome everyone to this conversation that we are having, this Wandering Conversation series. It's a series that I'm putting together to introduce us to some folks that we either have known from a while ago or that I think we should know and that I think would be interesting for us to talk with. Today, we're talking with Ken Neal, who is a longtime member of Central Christian Church going way back, and he was part of the church when they were ordaining a large amount of people into the Disciples of Christ denomination. So Ken, thanks for joining us today and joining our conversation.
My pleasure.
You want to just give us a little bit of your history, kind of just a brief introduction of yourself, and then give a history about your interaction, your engagement with Central Christian Church.
Okay, now you're asking for a lot of information there, which could take us many years. I'm Ken Neal, as you already pointed out. I am retired. I'm living in the outskirts of Buffalo, New York, Williamsville, in a lovely little retirement cottage that we really love. And I served 30 years in this general area at Cleveland Heights Christian Church in the town of Cheektowaga. My family said, why don't you move to places that we can spell? Because I came here from Schenectady. Anyway, so 30 years here at Cleveland Heights Christian Church. I taught about 5 years after that in retirement at the Niagara University in the Religious Studies Department, which was much fun. I really enjoyed doing that. Before that, I was on the regional staff. I worked with several of the former regional ministers back. That's why I was in Schenectady. Okay. And then before that, I was in a little, talk about spelling, my first church was in Poston Kill, New York, just outside of Albany and Troy. Now we'll skip the education for the moment and go back to Central Christian Church.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Of course, in those days was the Church of Christ Disciples.
Right.
I didn't start my life there. My mother says I was almost born in the Baptist church basement. But the next morning I was born in the normal way. We had to leave that Baptist church because it came very fundamental, and it just wasn't something that we, and I mean 100 of us, couldn't stay with. Mm-hmm. So little old 1 or 2 year old me and the rest of the crowd went and formed their own Temple Baptist Church. Mm-hmm. I think that's in the 40s. I haven't done any research and have a lousy memory. But anyway, somewhere around in there, we rented a facility from the Masons. And we called ourselves the Temple, Masonic Temple, the Temple Baptist Church. Now, funny thing is, with 100 people, we thought we were struggling and small. Nowadays, people would be pretty excited with that size congregation, I guess. And so Dr. Chester A. Sillers, who was the pastor at the Church of Christ Disciples, Central Christian, invited us, I guess the elders did too, to join en masse, which we did. And they dragged me along, kicking and screaming. My mother said, you will like it there, Kenneth, because they have a stage. So that was okay.
That's funny.
My young days, I never got over it. So yeah, I was in the primary department, and those were the days when all those rooms downstairs had people in them on a Sunday morning and beyond.
And that story you tell is how we actually became dually aligned with the American Baptist Church.
That's why we suddenly became an American Baptist Church as well, yes.
Have both Disciples of Christ and American Baptist.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so that was fine. However, our disciple roots, I think, took a little bit stronger hold, at least in those days. And all those ministers ordained that you were talking about, Chet was just, as I look back, I probably didn't appreciate him properly then. As I look back, he was a really avant-garde pastor. He was, very much anti-war, made sure all of us boys were commissioned to ministry long before draft people would, say, hey, is this a last-minute decision? Pulled in people from Park Avenue Church in New York and from Lynn, Mass., which existed then, to have a little conference and to authorize us. We didn't have the formalities that we do now. So several of us were commissioned to what they called full-time Christian service in the sanctuary of that church. Chet was another one who said we should have a radio station.
Oh, really?
It's hard to listen to WICC Bridgeport and impossible to listen to New York to find out if school was out, So he was among the the movers and the shakers that got the WLAD on the air.
Wow.
Which meant we had a real tight connection with them.
Mm-hmm.
We had a direct line. Maybe it's still there. That
Mm-hmm.
you just had to flip a switch, and we were on the air,
Wow.
and that was very exciting.
So you all from the church were DJs on the air, or did shows on the air?
Well, our Sunday morning worship service,
Mm-hmm.
not every day, not every time, but it could be done quickly. We were the backup in case somebody else
Mm.
didn't make it. We also used our Carolinic bells, which you, I think, still have.
Mm-hmm.
They taught me how to use them. And so Harold Banks, which may mean something to somebody, and I were shared the responsibility of 10 minutes at 9:05 a.m. on Sunday mornings playing those bells over
Wow.
WLAD. I can't imagine listening to those bells for 10 minutes on the radio, but at least my Aunt Myrtle did, so that was okay. So yeah, so what I'm really saying is you can see that he and the rest of that congregation just loved their kids,
Mm-hmm.
and from the very earliest moments kind of helped us to love the church and know the church loved us.
Right.
And that was the strength of what we now call Central Christian Church, no question.
Wow.
Bob, I don't know if you're going to be interviewing Bob Bradley, but he is a close friend, of course, and
Mm-hmm.
he was ordained in a similar manner.
Right.
We all went off to Lynchburg College because that was the college we were associated with as a
Mm-hmm.
church. We also were associated with Yale Divinity School. We had 40 Yaleys down in Yale at that time, so they called themselves the Campbell Club. They would meet with us once a year for dinner. The
Mm-hmm.
Campbell Club dinner was a highlight, and one of its members became one of our youth leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So guess where I wanted to go to seminary?
Right. Right.
Did.
Yeah, they had a big disciple presence there.
We had a very big. We had a house.
A house,
on
yes.
Center Street, which
Mm-hmm.
I think belongs to Episcopalians now. I don't know if
Oh,
they.
wow. Yeah, I think there's two disciple students currently at
Really?
Yale. Uh-huh. So
Yeah.
it's,
No, it was major. We formed a church, the Canner Street Christian Church. That's where the house was,
mm-hmm.
and we paid the minister, who was Harry Baker Adams, which is the
Mm-hmm.
son of Hampton Adams from Park Avenue again.
Wow.
We paid him a magnificent salary of $0. And elders met every year to double it because we appreciated his work.
Right. I'm sure you felt the love.
I'm sure he felt the love. But back to the church, as I said, they were just very long suffering with all of us, and especially me, because I was a little more peculiar than most of them.
Mm-hmm.
But we did have a newspaper for our youth group.
Wow.
We used the underneath the parlor. I don't know what you do with the parlor downstairs, but it has a fireplace in it.
Right.
We used to light that fireplace and sit around it and sing songs. And it was just wonderful.
Well, that became a movie room.
Oh, yes?
For the group that rents our basement.
Well, that's a good room for that.
It is, and we just got it back, and it's becoming another meeting room for us now. So maybe we can put in a fake fire, and we
can put a fake fire in.
Sit around a TV fire.
Yeah, you could. And I don't know if the little pass-through is still there, but there was a little kitchenette next to it.
Oh, wow, no.
So they gave us their old mimeograph. A mimeograph, for the uninformed, is a thing you crank and bullets come out. They got a new one, and they gave us the old one, so we printed our weekly newsletter on it.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of adults in the church really said they liked to get it, so we distributed it to anybody that wanted it besides our kids.
Oh, that's cool.
And so the relationship there was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see that when the time came to decide what I was going to do with my life, and I was not the only one.
Uh-huh.
It was kind of obvious that something in the line of Christian service was going to be in the cards. So that's the background there. Of course, my whole family has been through the church. My mother's third husband has given some money to the church. Their name is on the wall.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that history. It's always great to hear about the people that have come before that have helped the church sustain itself. And so, yeah, it's great to hear that. This series is one that's coming out of our Lenten series, focusing on wilderness. Kind of the idea that, based on Jesus going into the wilderness and being tempted and then emerging and starting his ministry. So I'm curious to hear kind of, you've been through seminary, you've been on this path, and I'm just curious about if you've ever experienced a period of wilderness, what that looked like for you, and kind of how was it transforming in your life, and what did you do in order to emerge out of the wilderness? And kind of what did it look like as you entered and as you left?
I have gone through probably several wilderness experiences, which I will spare you on some of them.
Mm-hmm.
First being in Lynchburg College after coming out of the Connecticut school system. Lynchburg was pretty easy.
Mm.
Going from Lynchburg to Yale University was not.
I can imagine.
So the first wilderness was in the middle of the first semester.
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to do rather than be a minister?
Mm.
Because I don't read fast. I don't read easily. When I asked the professor, showed him the syllabus and said, well, which of these is the textbook? They said, well, all of them. That sort of thing made me think, maybe I'm in the wrong racket. I don't know. But after the first semester, we survived that. And it took, again, Harry Baker Adams sat me down and we talked about it and kind of worked it through and said that we'll make it. And I didn't graduate with honors, but I got out of there.
But you made it.
I am.
Right.
That was number one. Number two was midlife. You haven't faced that one yet. Midlife is tough, and I wasn't sure you could survive past midlife. That was in the late 40s, 50s. My age, 40s, 50s. And I was, you get to that point where you've lived half your life and you wonder what you've accomplished or what you ought to be accomplishing. Of course, I had by then, and this is the bad part, I had a wonderful family, still do. My wife, Marjorie, and 4 wonderful children, and I loved them and they loved me, and we were everything. And so, I've always defined depression, clinical depression, as being, you're depressed, but there's absolutely no reason to be.
Right.
Everything, if you leave it alone, it would be just fine. But there was just something. I hadn't made very many friends beyond the family ever. And although sometimes looking back, people have said, well, you're an idiot, you did. So there you go.
Didn't recognize what you had around you.
You didn't realize what I already had. That's right. Which was true when I was in the early days at the church, too. We enjoyed it, but I had no idea how creative Chet and the others were to help us become who we were.
Oh, wow.
And so here I was. And so I was kind of on a journey. I hate to say this out loud, looking for friends. All the wrong, I guess not all the wrong places, but because it gave my family a terrible, what do we, chopped liver kind of thing. And I understand that. My oldest daughter, I think, really, really suffered with that and had a terrible time. And I kept saying to myself, I don't know, as you said, in the wilderness experience, is there a way out? And I wasn't sure there was, but darn it, there was a way out. And of course, the way out, basically, what is it? They say, fake it till you make it kind of thing.
Right.
You just go on about your business and you just try to do what you think is the best that you can do. And all of a sudden, one day, the dawn comes out. And I'm able to tell people going through it because almost everybody does.
Yes.
Here I am. I tell the story of a woman who was the minister's wife in the church I served in Troy, which I didn't mention. Post and Kill and Troy were put together in Troy, New York. And I wasn't married then, and she was a wonderful minister's wife because she was the minister's wife of the deceased pastor. But she was not a problem. She was nothing but charity. Well, later, after Marge and I were married, we were at a General Assembly, I think, in St. Louis. And this was, to show you how old I am, the arch was only halfway built.
Wow.
Only one side of it was, but you could go in it. And of course, we did. And I don't know if you've ever done it.
I have, yes.
Okay, so it's a little capsule that'll take you up there. Only it take you up there to nothing.
Right. I don't know if I'd like that feeling.
I didn't like it too well. So Marge and I were riding in the little capsule, and when we got up to the top, the door opened up, and we very tentatively put our foot out the door, and there was Mrs. Sharp, the lady I was talking about, standing on the other side, saying, "It's okay, kids, come on out." And I use that as a kind of some of us have gone before, and we can kind of say, you can stand up.
Okay, come on out.
Come on out.
How did that affect your theology, your spirituality? How did that experience, did it change, or did it transform into something different?
It changed it in that I was much more satisfied and excited at the work of the church. I mean, if you're a place 30 years, I
Mm-hmm.
would say we have to reinvent ourselves at least every 10, and
Mm-hmm.
probably more often than that.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the church people, it was only one more of those redos, where we reinvented ourselves and came up with uh, another emphasis or stuff. And so that was, I have to say, my congregation at Cleveland Heights was the most supportive, wonderful people,
Mm-hmm.
especially a group that gathered for what we called Bible study on Monday morning.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really licking the wounds after the day
Mm-hmm.
before.
Uh-huh.
And
Right.
when people would say, don't you have more? I mean, I did have colleagues, but they would say, where do you get your real spiritual uplift? And I say, that crew that meets with me,
Mm.
and we share our successes and our failures, and we don't point fingers. We say, okay, where do we go from here?
Can you speak on that just a moment? Because the church, that's something the church is starting to experiment with, having small groups and having groups come together outside of just Sunday.
Sure.
So you're talking about the importance of this one group. Was it the same people that came together every Monday? Was it a consistent group of the same people?
It was consistent, but it was always open. So there were sometimes people that came that didn't, come all the time.
Right.
We had more than one. It was this was the point. We were a very busy and active church.
Mm-hmm.
And probably, like, I don't know how you're organized now, but back in those days, they had what they called the functional church organization. Came right out of Indianapolis. Boy, we followed it to the letter. And so we had committees upon committees, and we had textbooks, and we gave them out. The new chairman got the church year calendar, which they still publish, and a special little packet of materials of how you do evangelism or how you do the worship department and all that stuff. And we had program council meetings in addition to board meetings and everything. And one day, because I have to say, my secretary was another really wonderful support. She was a member of the church,
Mm-hmm.
and we bounced off of each other quite well. So one day I came in and I said, "This ends today. We just have too many meetings. We're here all the time, but it's just got to stop."
Mm-hmm.
It was that point that we began to set the Monday morning and some evenings at night for other people, and we experimented with a lot of things. Of course, we didn't have the flu going around,
Right.
so we did. I don't know if you've heard of Super 8s, but those were couples would invite three other couples.
Oh.
Yeah, that's right. Three other couples.
Oh, interesting.
for a meal, and they would not. We had a subject, but I didn't go to all, obviously,
Right.
and that was very helpful for a while.
Mm-hmm.
We've done the Monday morning was the most consistent because I think they enjoyed that. They were free to come, and it because it was always a time of reflecting on what we had done, what we might be doing in the future. But it wasn't a business meeting because we were studying the scripture. That's why we were there.
Right.
Once we got around to it. We were retired, or they were retired. I wasn't. So the time was not too much factor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the fun things, which is an aside, we had a wonderful janitor in those days too. And besides cleaning the church and everything, he got here. He used to work for Chevrolet, so he used to come at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And he would start the coffee. And he so proudly, when I came in at 9, would say, "Fresh coffee." I knew better, of course. That pot went all day long. Wow. Dreadful stuff. But the good news was any group who came in, any individual who came in, knew they could run over to the coffee pot and grab something that would pass, at least, as coffee. And that hospitality is the name of the game. And so sitting around, whether we're at a board meeting or at these Bible studies, there was not formal refreshments, but there was just kind of always something.
You had that coffee pot going.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So there was that. Yeah. That was the midlife was the worst time of really what I was going to do next. I mean, it came out of it extremely well.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I think it's interesting to hear people's stories of how they've been through something and made their way through, and how it affects them in all sorts of areas, physically, emotional, spiritually. I think the wilderness can affect us all in all
Well,
matters of our life.
and I don't know how our time is going, but they gave me as a sabbatical pretty late in my stay there, because frankly they were having a financial thing, and they thought they gave me a sabbatical. They were going to pay me, but it was going. I don't know. Somehow they thought they were going to save some money, and and they suggested I go to Hawaii because I have ancestors who were missionaries there, and I was working on a book, and they said you need to go there, so I did. And I won't bore you with the whole thing, but it had happened that I was able to attend the Hawaii conference of the United Church of Christ that was meeting on Kauai Island. And then I mentioned that not only to say that I had a wonderful 3 months in Hawaii, but one of those weeks was there. And the keynote speaker was David Hirano. I don't know if that made me.
It does.
He was I think the conference minister in Connecticut. He went to national staff in some stuff. And then he became the keynote speaker. And the theme for that conference was Through the Wilderness.
Oh, wow.
And he was the one who highlighted it and said, being in the wilderness is not bad. That's where you get the renewal. That's where you get the recharge. That's where you get the restart.
Yes.
You come out of it stronger, different, but stronger.
Right.
And I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's a great kind of add on to where we are now, actually, spending all this time at home now with the
right. What are we going to do with this? That is a real question.
This could be a real transformative moment for everything.
Well, you can have to look at it this way. Last Sunday afternoon, my afternoon church, I have 3, that I go to that I don't worry about. I just go make trouble. We met by Zoom. And I told you when you asked me if we could do this, I said, well, the good news is, we've been reduced to that or raised to that or something.
Right.
So I have experienced it.
Right.
Before. And now here we're doing it again.
Here we are. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just want to close out. You're now back in the New England, the Northeast region, and we're having our regional assembly back in Danbury in September. Knock on wood.
It's in my calendar.
Yes.
Assuming that we get better by then.
Exactly. That's right. I'm curious, is there anything, any lasting piece, as Central Christian is going through a transformational moment now, what would one piece of advice you could give to the people of the church as we're going through this experience?
One piece, huh?
Or 5?
Well, first of all, don't, of course, give up. We have several churches out here that have been going through very similar things. You're certainly not alone in what you're going through. And if I may compliment you online, or I do it privately, I just think you're doing wonderful things to keep the spirit. I have no idea what the place looks like on Sunday. Oh, I know it's empty now. But I do know that you have just been breathing life into the place. And it may be all your life, I don't know, but something good is happening.
No, we're being blessed, yes.
I think you are. We have a person whom I raised up here, I'm very proud to say, at Cleveland Heights, who is a pastor and is literally saving a little congregation in East Aurora, New York, that had gotten down to like 8 or 10 people. And she just, with her creative motherly instincts, has raised them up to be a vibrant community. I'm not sure how much larger it is, but they've learned how to kind of rethink church a little bit. And of course, the church I mentioned in the afternoon that I meet with, we only have about 10 or a dozen members too. But it doesn't matter because we're a church that meets with whoever comes. The place is usually full. It's a small place. A little cabin. It's a cabin in the woods. You can come out sometime. Right. We look out on the sunset across the Niagara River to the Canadian shoreline.
Oh, wow.
And so every Sunday afternoon, we get to see the sun go down.
Wow.
And we do wonderful things out there. And that's a small congregation, but it is not predicated on worrying about who's a member or not. We just kind of come together.
Yeah, they say every 500 years the church goes through a reformation, and we're 500 years past Martin Luther's reformation, and I think we can see that on all over society. The
It's
church
going
is
to look so different. I don't know what this particular part of our wilderness journey right now is going to do to us, because I think you can survive physical separation, just so long. It's fun today to do this.
Yes.
I don't know. I'll get back to me in 2 or 3 months and see if
That's right. That's right. If we're stuck in our apartments and our houses, we might all go prematurely gray, I think.
Yeah. Well, I've got that covered.
Yes.
I don't have anything to worry about now. And my father was bald, and I'm not at 83, so I'm just not worried about it.
Well, thank you, Ken, so much for doing this with us, and I really appreciate. You're the first member of Central or Church of Christ disciples that I met from the previous generation. And
old days.
Yeah, I met you.
We're a dying flock, so you better get to the rest of us.
No, but I really appreciate your support, and I really appreciate who you are, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in September in person.
The Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, as they say, we will be there.
Yes, well, that's great. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.